Hi, my name is Keenan,
My name's Steve.
and you're listening to Saving Lives with Drones. Well, Steve, you are a new guest host. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Keenan. I appreciate it.
I'm really super excited about having you on. It's just our conversations. I've just been super, you have definitely a strong interest in this technology, and it's something that I'm looking forward to working with you and kind of sharing our information and kind of our experiences out to the public and to other public safety personnel out there to, just make them more efficient in using drones. So definitely looking forward to it. So
Well,
it's
thank
great.
you for having me. I'm looking forward to it too.
Yep.
Is there any sponsors you'd like to mention before we start?
Yeah, actually, we usually do start sponsorship, and as always, Sky Aero Imagery Services. They're our number one sponsor. They provide a lot of leading edge aero imagery services for real estate, construction, progress, public safety, focused in the Chicagoland area. So they help fund this podcast, and we're always thankful for them for doing so. So with that, since you're the new guy, is there anything that you'd like to know? Anything you'd like to learn about, or what do you have any initial questions? I guess you could say about just the use of drones in public safety arena.
Has there been any recent incidences where you have utilized your drone in any capacity?
There's actually been a number of them, 3 to 4. I should say like 3.5,
Okay.
where we actually did utilize it. The very first time I think that I remember utilizing it was actually at a local airport, and we had got called for a report of a gyrocopter that went down.
Oh, wow.
Now, thankfully, no one actually got hurt, and the gyrocopter didn't go down. He just happened to be practicing engine out maneuvers, and it looked like he went down. But once the gyrocopter kind of went below the tree line, he recovered it and, continued to fly off. But the people who called it didn't see that part, so they just thought it had crashed.
Okay.
We did have manned aircraft initially looking out there, but the decision was made to bring an unmanned aircraft in to be able to get closer to the tree line and to look at more oblique angles on an angle in order to, try to see down into the tree line, because there was kind of a creek in there, and you can only get so close safely with manned aircraft. Definitely, definitely was useful to actually have the drone to actually rule out the area.
Right.
15, 20 minutes into when we were using the drone, that's when we found out that the pilot was found safe and sound, landed at the airport like 30, 40 minutes ago, and it was kind of a big wild goose chase. But, those things happen. I mean, that happens in the fire service. It's, it's not a bad thing, but it's just, part of the job, and you have to investigate and make sure that it really didn't happen. And so we were able to use the technology to rule out entire swaths of areas. So that was very, very helpful. The second call that comes to mind is actually a water recovery incident that we had. And this happened around Christmas. It hit the news, definitely local and kind of regional news. We had a car going, and people were unfortunately inside of it. Right. We were able to use the drone to determine to see if we could find any oil spots, which we weren't able to find any oil spots with the drill. But we also used the drone to kind of monitor the entire incident area, just kind of have a second set of eyes from the air as we had divers going into the water, because it was sub-zero temperatures outside. It was a little bit windy outside. There was ice. It's just a lot of dangers. And so having that second set of eyes from a different perspective just increased the overall safety. So it isn't always about the sexiest thing about, trying to find the person or whatnot. Sometimes It's just supporting the overall operation. And we were able to get some, utilize the drone to actually get some valuable information in that, first, so how the incident went, the divers eventually found the vehicle. They pulled the vehicle out. When they pulled it out, we were asked to get the license plate, but the license plate was on the downside of the embankment. Well, I was able just to zoom in from the drone from the water side without putting a firefighter, because it was a pretty steep bank, and it's held on cables from the tow truck. But if one of those cables went, that car's going down, and you put a fireman down there, injury could happen. It's a lot easier to put a machine in that position, and you lose a drone. Oh well, it's
Exactly.
not a big deal. So we were able to get the plate from looking at the drone, and that was a valuable thing.
Sure.
We were also able to. I was able to create like a map of the area. So once they had pulled out the car due to conditions, and they weren't 100% sure if there was a second victim or not, because they just didn't know if that person was in the car or not, or somewhere else. They they pulled out the buoy and everything, but I had mapped out the entire area ahead of time, so I can mark where that buoy was, where they had marked the car, and where they had marked the rest of the incident itself.
Okay.
And we were able to use that information to continue searching to see if there was that second victim in the water, and we can use that as a pinpoint. And I was able to not only look at where that buoy was, but I saw where the tracks where the vehicle went in, and I could see how the car got dragged out. I was able to triangulate that, and we did find the second target roughly 4 to 5 feet away from that triangulation of those 2 points.
Oh wow. Now, was there any special like any obstacles you had to overcome, like weather
Cold.
related?
The cold. So, with drones, they typically use LiPo batteries. LiPo
Okay.
batteries do not like extreme cold.
And how long do those usually last?
For the Inspire one I was flying, I was probably getting maybe 13, 14 minutes. The drone, I think, offered not just value, on the scene, but even value in the post review of the incident, because you can see the entire incident, where everything was placed, and be able to use it as a learning tool for future incidents that occur in the future. So,
Oh, very cool. I'm glad that worked out for you.
yeah. So then we got a second incident that happened a little bit later, about I want to say it's a February, March timeframe. I don't remember the exact date, but it was actually in Ottawa, and I was requested to come out by Mavis 25 out there, and they wanted to create a map of the entire incident. Base of tornado had kind of went through Naplate and parts of Ottawa, Illinois, and there was a lot of damage. I don't think anybody was hurt, which is thank God, but
Right.
they wanted to be able to show the extensiveness of the damage, for town purposes, see what they have to repair and how they're going to deal with debris and whatnot. So
Sure.
after everything had kind of settled with the weather-wise, I came out there and basically created a map. And what it is the drone, kind of similar to like doing pre-planning, just flies basically like a lawnmower pattern through the
Back and forth.
back and forth.
Okay.
Just keeps going back and forth, and the camera points straight down and starts taking pictures like every so many feet, and it overlaps these pictures. And I take them into special software and process those pictures into into like one large map. It's like a Google Earth like type of map, but I can also create a 3D model, so I can actually spin it around.
Wow.
And
Like a big blueprint.
like basically like a big blueprint. That's it around. So you can actually kind of see. I can take measurements, determine how much volume a particular area of like a low line area can actually contain, how much like liquid it could contain or material it could contain, and just to help them kind of plan as to how they're going to handle the disaster. So that was about a whole day I spent out there, and then it took about a day and a half to process all the data, because it was the largest processing I've ever done. And
Well, that's awesome.
my computers were screaming, trying to get it all done.
Sure.
Trying to get it down to as quickly as possible. So, yeah.
Is there any certain altitude that you had to reach to get the big shots of the ground of the damage, or
Well,
how high do you have to fly?
So it's actually a good question. So we fly typically about 120 to 150 feet.
Okay.
And it depends on the type of sensor. And I say sensor like the type of camera that I'm using. The camera lens has a concept of a field of view. So like the longer the zoom, the narrower the field of view. So when it's taking these pictures, the pictures have to overlap.
Okay.
But with the narrower the field of view, the more data it collects. So if I have let's say a 20 megapixel sensor, and I've got, let's say, I'm just going to say 5,000 pixels going across. I can have 5,000 pixels going across 10 feet or 5,000 pixels going across 100 feet.
Oh, wow.
And that changes my ground sampling distance. Like each pixel then is, completely
A lot more detail.
a lot more detailed when it's smaller, right? Because I have more pixels per foot type
Sure.
of thing. So I typically shoot for half inch or less per pixel. That
Okay.
gives the greatest amount of detail. So typically, like with an Inspire 1, let's say with an X3 lens, I will fly about 120, 150 feet max, unless there's some type of safety related issue, like power lines or like a water tower or something. That I don't like doing mapping missions when there's objects that are higher than my altitude that I'm flying. I like to fly above everything else, including antennas and everything, just to be on the super safe side.
Sure.
Now, with the Inspire 2 and let's say the X4S camera, which is my go-to right now for doing pre-planning, that's a 20 megapixel sensor. So that 20 megapixel sensor compared to the 12 megapixel sensor on the Inspire 1 with the X3 camera almost doubles the amount of resolution that I can get. So I can actually get finer sampling distance and potentially fly at a slightly higher altitude. Just again to avoid water towers or cell towers or radio towers, whatever that may be. Okay. So 120, 150 feet is ideal. The general rule of thumb right now, that's where you like electro-optical. If you're going to try to do photogrammetry which is basically like this mapping concept with thermal, you typically want to do it from 200 feet above. It's been kind of the go-to. It just matters on what you're trying to. What I have found is being too low is bad. You think you
Sure.
would think it's you're getting this great sampling distance, and you're getting this down to the centimeter or half centimeter, quarter centimeter. Yeah, it's not really that valuable. It
Okay.
just isn't. So.
Well, thank you for answering that. What kind of drone were you using on that incident?
So that was the Inspire 2.
Okay.
For the other one. So all my drones that I utilize are all DJI drones. They make a pretty good, decent quality product. They have an SDK, software development kit, so people can make third-party apps. So like when I do that pre-planning mission, I'm not flying that grid. I just tell the app, this is the area I want you to fly. It figures out the grid pattern to have the drone fly, and I just monitor the flight in case something goes wrong.
Oh, really? So the computer takes over?
So the app takes over and tells it exactly how it should flight with the GPS coordinates, going back and forth, and tells it when to take the pictures as it's flying.
Oh, that's really handy.
Yeah, it is because it keeps a straight line. I mean, you can try flying it by hand, it won't be straight.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll get close, and really good pilots can get really close, but it's really hard to fly super straight lines, and it's really important to have that overlap. Be consistent between the different images so that way you get good quality data. At pre-planning missions, I'll fly the Inspire 2. For search and rescue missions, I'm probably going to fly the Inspire 1 because I can put my thermal camera on that.
Okay. And that's you can't put the thermal camera on.
The Inspire 1, yeah.
Okay.
Not the Inspire 2. Supposedly that's not going to happen. Like they won't allow thermal camera on the Inspire 2 because Inspire 2 drone is really meant for cinematography and film. But it's a high resolution camera that's important for taking pictures. Now they put a high resolution camera on another drone, like there's another one called the Matrix series, which you can consider. So the Inspire series are more like the film, real estate, photography type of drones. There's another series called the Matrix series, and right now they have the Matrix 100, the 600, and just recently the 200 just came out. So the 100 is a development platform. The 600 is a big, massive, heavy lift drone. I can lift like 15 pounds with it, like take a chainsaw from point A to point B with that drone.
So there's quite a few different drones out there for all different purposes.
Yep. So the Matrix 200 is a new one that just came out, and it's made just for industrial inspections. And it's cool because it can last in the air for 45 minutes, but the 210 is the one I really am interested in because I can have actually two cameras on it at the same time. So I could put a thermal camera and I could put a high a high optical zoom camera on there at the same time and be able to flip to them back and forth without having to land the aircraft, swap the sensors, and take back off again.
Sure, that's really convenient.
So that, but though, to my knowledge, that won't be out until like September-ish, maybe a little bit later.
Okay.
So we'll see. You know, I was a little skeptical about the Matrice 200. I went to go see it at FDIC. Not as skeptical about it as I was. Still, I'm that type of guy. Like, I want to see it. I want to fly it. I want to see how it behaves. So, no, we'll just go from there. See how that works.
Well, very cool.
Are there any particular instances that come to mind that you think of what could have been really useful? And we could talk about that. Maybe like ideas that you would have that you would thought it would have been useful in, or why it would have been useful.
Yeah, sure. Actually, one came before I was even in the fire service.
Okay.
Going back to the airport, the local airport in town. I was a maintenance worker there, and there was a small helicopter that went down in the field, and the guy had a heart attack, went down in the field, and it was real high with corn, real thick. You couldn't see anything. All you did was just see a little smoke. Emergency vehicles are trying to get in there, the ambulances, firefighters. They couldn't find it.
Okay.
There's no way to get through there. So the best option at the time was take one of the other helicopters at the airport. One of the pilots got up, was flying around and trying to pinpoint where this guy was at. Because at the time we didn't know if he was alive, if anything was survivable. And he got up there and he was able to talk to us, via radio.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't actually involved in that incident, but I remember watching the firefighters and the medics going through the field, and they're able to pull him out thanks to this helicopter pilot.
So how long did it take until like you guys got word of the call to how long the helicopter, like average? Was it pretty quick, or
that day was pretty slow?
Okay.
Yeah, from the time I actually probably was one of the first people to notice that the helicopter went down.
Okay.
And by the time the emergency vehicles arrived on scene and the helicopter got in the air to try to find the location where he was at, I would probably say between 30 and 35 minutes.
Yeah, and that's typical, because here's, even like when we call like a medevac unit and whatnot, or call the county in, it's going to take about 20-30 minutes for them to get out there.
Right.
Because what they got to do a pre-flight, they got to do run up, and I just know from being a student pilot for manned aircraft like Cessnas, I get into an aircraft and that I need to do my pre-flight inspection. That's going to take 10 minutes. It's going to take me 5 minutes to taxi and do a run-up.
Sure.
Helicopter is no different. And then you got to give it time to get in position. Now, granted, it's right at the airport, so obviously that's only a few minutes, but you figure by the time you do your scene size up, you recognize everything that's there, you call saying, hey, get the phone call, get the pilot to the helicopter. Yeah, 35 minutes, that's actually, I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, time is precious when it comes to that.
Time is definitely precious. And then, but if you take let's say a drone, and this is actually very similar to the call that the first one that we actually used, when thankfully the guy did not have a heart attack. He was okay, and the aircraft was okay, but just looked like that he may have crashed. We had the drone probably up in the air, I would say probably within 15 minutes from the time I got onto the scene itself.
And that cuts that time down in half.
And the upside that we had at that time was that there was a county sheriff that just happened to be at the airport.
Oh, okay.
And they had already done the pre-flight and all that, so they just had basically start the rotors and then take off and then do their file, but they didn't see anything. So we waited for them to land. Then we went ahead and utilized the drone to start, ruling more obscure places out, the things that you can't, like I can get down to 40 feet and then look straight on an angle. You're not going to do that with a manned aircraft.
No.
And trying to have, we had teams like walking around the fields. Now, granted, we didn't have high corn, thankfully, but just trying to look like in ditches and tree lines, it would have taken forever. And I can very quickly just, go to 40 feet and just scan the horizon. So that's actually one scenario that's actually very, very good use of, or I think a drone would have been actually,
That would have been very helpful that day. Even after the incident, the NTSB came by, wanted to reconstruct the scene, put all the pieces and parts back together. Unfortunately, the pilot died. And then we ran into the problem of trying to find pieces of this helicopter.
Yep.
It was in the tree line, it was in the corn, and so they had to send the helicopter back up and try to locate where there were some knocked down stalks to try to find parts.
And that costs money. And
oh, yeah.
It's not easy.
Right.
and it's a lot easier. I mean, drone is small. You can put it in the cab of your vehicle or in a compartment and pull it out and just be to go with it. I mean, it's one. This is just one particular scenario that, or I think it's like search and rescue is probably. Not like consider probably the sexiest scenario, but it's probably the most impactful scenario that you're going to have.
Sure.
Next to pre-planning. I know it's the least sexiest thing, but I think pre-planning is actually the most impactful thing that we'll do in the fire service using drones. Being able to take like an entire steel mill and just kind of lay out the whole land and know where everything's at. So if a disaster did happen, you knew what the structure looked like before the disaster happened. Right?
Yeah, you knew what you were getting yourself into.
Yep.
And nowadays there's so many big warehouses and buildings and
Yeah,
just so much danger out there.
We have places in town that are just like, where there's different hazards and whatnot. We just did a pre-plan of a local school bus area, just to know where everything's laid out, how they position the vehicle. So when incident command pulls up and we're bringing other vehicles, we can say, hey, come approach to this side, go down 2 lanes of buses, then make a left.
And that could save lives.
And that timing, as opposed to backing out, because we come up to the scene and especially like the way the school bus parking lot or any mass parking lot's laid out, you got tall buses, so you can't see what's going on, and you think you went down the right lane, but then it's just like it's all the way across the property of the school buses, and then you have to come and spin back around or back up. It can be a real pain, and trying to, it's kind of like a maze.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is.
Yeah.
And it's and being able to have that information to incident command, like once they get there and saying, okay, go down 3 lanes of buses, you should be able to make a left right there, and you'll be right there at the incident once you make a right. And I think that's
it's another tool in the toolbox.
it's
that
definitely
could,
andas and that's one of the key things that I
can
always
help.
emphasize. Drones are just a tool.
right. It's not the end all be all.
It's not the end all be all. Figuring out when to use it and how to use it in the right way are always going to be the key scenarios. But it's definitely going to be. I think it's going to be a tool that we're going to see a lot more of. New York's starting to use it.
Sure.
LA's just starting to. Fire departments just starting to utilize it.
And
I know Chicago's looking into it.
Okay, I was just going to ask about Chicago.
See
The
how-
word's getting out there.
The word's getting out there, and we'll see how it all pans out because that's what it comes down to.
Right.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us for this show. My name is Keenan,
My name's Steve.
and you were listening to Saving Lives with Drones.